Good morning, everyone. My name is Jan Narasimhan, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. On behalf of Beroe, I would like to welcome you all to another webinar from Beroe Insights. In today's webinar, we will have our presenters discuss autonomous virtual software engineers and analyze how they are expected to change the IT services procurement. So before we move ahead with the presentation, I have a few general set of instructions as always. Please note that all the attendees will be placed on mute. During the course of the presentation, if you would like to post questions, you will find a box on the right-hand side indicated in red. I request you to type in your questions and hit the send button. As the presentation progresses, I will note down the high-frequency questions and post it to the presenter at the end of the session. If you experience any connectivity issues, I request you to close the window, go back to the email and try to reconnect using the same link. If there are further problems, please do not hesitate to contact Puneet at puneet.ramal@beroe-inc.com, which you can also find in the email shared with you earlier. Moving on, let me quickly introduce our presenters for today's webinar. Our first presenter, Saheli Hazra Chakrabarti, is an IT service and software domain expert at Beroe Inc. She has built extensive knowledge and expertise in categories including domain-based software, CRM, and business intelligence software and services for end-use industries such as agrochemical, telecommunications, pharmaceuticals, etc. Our second presenter, Sathvik Mohan, is also an IT service and software domain expert at Beroe Inc. He has built extensive knowledge in categories such as application development and maintenance, services and domain-specific software for end-use industries such as telecommunications, pharmaceuticals, etc. We're also joined by Terry Walby, a leading industry expert. Terry is Chief Executive of Autonomy, an automation technology company specializing in delivering automation in IT services and support. Prior to this role, Terry spent 3 years as Managing Director of Ipsoft Inc., a managed service and automation technology company where he built the UK business, developed strategic global partnerships, and reshaped the company portfolio as a global CMO. He is also a regular contributor to a number of technology and business publications and a regular speaker at industry forums and events on the topics of automation, IT services, and technology futures. Thank you, Terry, for your time today. Without further ado, let me pass it on to the presenters.
Thank you, Janani. Good day and thank you for attending this webinar. My name is Saheli and I, along with my colleague Sathvik, will take you through this presentation. The objective of this webinar is to explore automation in IT service category. I feel that it is critical for any sourcing manager to understand what IT service automation is. Going forward, we will present to you how exactly can automation help you save more than 40% of the labor cost in IT help desk service category. To put things in perspective, let us take the example of John, an IT procurement manager who successfully achieved his cost-saving target in the IT help desk category with the help of automation. John, as I introduced to you, is an IT service category manager for a Fortune 500 company with a multi-million-dollar spend in IT service category. The spend in IT help desk service itself amounting to a few $1,000,000. With the beginning of the new financial year, John was given a target of saving $1 million in IT help desk category. Last year, he had offshored this category and was able to achieve a saving of 20% on total labor cost, which is indeed a good achievement. But now, he had to save another $1 million on top of that. He found this a Herculean task and was very much worried. But needless to say, John had to get this thing done. Did he achieve his task? Let's see. Luckily, John met an old friend who worked as an IT procurement consultant. He informed John about IT automation, which has the potential of saving up to 40% in labor costs for the IT help desk services. At first, John thought his friend might be joking. He went back and started scouting for IT sourcing opportunities better than offshoring. He came across a few news items. One of them read, as per data compiled by ISG Outsourcing Advisory Firm, IT service automation can yield a cost saving of 60 to 80% for a company with significant ITO spend, whereas offshoring yields only 15 to 30%. So John now realized that his friend was indeed right. He became curious. He now sees automation as a viable option and wanted to learn more about it. Well, let us focus on automation now. Let's look at how automation has progressed over the years. In the good old days, there was task-level automation, which was executed using small scripts and few lines of coding. Task-level automation then progressed to activity-level automation, wherein source codes would be executed based on event triggers and timestamps. We can see task-level and activity-level automations applied to finance and accounting and also to human resource process outsourcing. But then came the third type of automation, which is none other than the ITSM automation toolkit. ITSM stands for IT Service Management Automation Toolkit. This toolkit helps digitally map a specific business process and execute the process automatically. The fourth and the latest approach to automation is artificially intelligent entities. These are the software robots, as we all know, which can be programmed and can fill in for a human resource and can carry out the IT service process without any human intervention. And this has been the latest development in ITSM automation toolkit. This new approach enables developers to quickly and easily transform the real business life process into a complete digital process. It is normally observed that ITSM automation tool is generally adopted by the IT outsourcing service providers, and the robotic process automation is adopted more by the end user industry clients who have a significant in-house IT operation. Well, based on your experience, Terry, how would you like to distinguish the different approaches of automation?
Thanks, Saheli. Yes, you're right. The distinction can be indeed along organisational lines based on the type of organisation, but we've also seen that the preferred approach to automation may depend on the maturity of tools within that operation. So for those organisations, be they end users or service providers, who are looking at the tooling used in their IT services function, this represents an ideal opportunity to deploy ITSM tool suites with high levels of automation to reduce their reliance on manual activities. It's a great opportunity to do that. For others who have existing tools in place, or for whom changing tools and systems may be too difficult, too expensive, or too time-consuming, or indeed for service providers who are required to use customer tools that they can't change, it often makes more sense to deploy a robotic automation approach, because that uses software to replicate human interaction and activity and therefore doesn't require a change to the systems and tools in use.
Well, thank you, Terry. Thank you for your insight. Now, John, like most others, had outsourced his operation to an IT service provider. So John knew that he should now check with his IT service provider and see that he employs an ITSM automation platform, which would bring the cost of service down. So John wants to see where automation would figure in the IT service landscape, and that's what we are going to see now. If we look at the IT service landscape, they are categorized broadly into three key service categories. business process outsourcing. The first layer, business process outsourcing, is a service category wherein the end user's business processes are carried out by a third-party IT service provider. Coming to the next one, which is the infrastructure services. This bucket of services supports the IT system and IT infrastructure of an end user industry client. Moving on to the next layer, which is the application service. This bucket deals with services related to development, maintenance, and modernization of custom-built applications. Now let's focus, where does automation stand in the IT service procurement landscape? Well, in the current scenario, automation has yielded great results in the IT helpdesk service category. This is because IT helpdesk service category is a well-standardized category, and hence this helps to clearly define the process and its objectives. The cost of automation in other service categories was very high, as it would take a lot of time to program the automated system to learn complicated process. So John now understood that automation is highly feasible for IT helpdesk services. And the question that would be there in everybody's mind now is, how does exactly this technology work? Well, let us consider a user who is working on his PC, and suddenly the software tool he is using is unresponsive and the system hangs. He submits an electronic form and raises a ticket with the customer care center. In the case of automation, a virtual software engineer would be addressing his issue. So now the end user actually encounters a robotic FTE. The virtual software engineer or the robotic FTE reads the issue form. It has got an access to a huge database where a lot of solutions are stored. The system searches the database for a relevant solution, and if it finds one, it deploys the solution to the end user. However, if the system doesn't find any solution, then what to do? Well, nothing to worry about. It escalates that issue to the developer team, and the developer team create a solution and deploy it to the end user via the virtual software engineer or the robotic FTE that we have here. And since the solution will be stored further in the database for future reference, the more issues result, the greater the efficiency, owing to increase in process efficiency. The machine learns each time and does not resort to the developers. And now John inquires. It's about the same process which the helpdesk support executive or a human resource FTE would be doing. What's the big difference if a robotic FTE does so? That's what we will be addressing now with the help of an example of a BPO service provider who automated a complaint resolution system. In the comparative analysis of the process, 3 factors that are to be considered before and after automation are primarily the time factor. It was found that a human resource was taking an average of 12 minutes to resolve an issue, whereas after automation, the automated system took an average of 4 minutes or even lesser to resolve the similar issue. Second most important factor which comes is the accuracy factor. When we talk about a human resource, it could have accurately solved a maximum of 90 out of 100 issues without the need for a rework, whereas the automated system was almost never wrong, giving us a 99.9% accuracy. And now comes the most crucial factor, which is the cost factor. An offshore human FTE costs around 30,000 USD per year, whereas when we talk about a virtual software engineer or a robotic FTE, it will cost only 15,000 USD. Well, that's a straight 50% saving in labor cost. This is a significant difference. But when we talk about all these benefits, there are always 3 issues which comes to our mind. These are a serious challenge pertaining to the IT helpdesk service industry. What are they, and how does automation actually deal with them? Well, first comes the labor arbitrage. When we talk about an automated system, this can be deployed anywhere and everywhere. So there is no concept of labor arbitrage at all. Then comes inflation rate. The machine feels no pressure of inflation. Hence, price of service is expected to be stable or might vary moderately. Attrition rate? Well, obviously, until and unless you shut down the machine and throw it, it is not going to leave you. So the three issues that we considered here, labor arbitrage, inflation, and attrition, are not challenges anymore. So John now understands that the three factors favoring automation and is satisfied by the answer to three potential challenges. But then these are the benefits that the IT service provider would get. What's in it for John? How can John capture the value of automation? Now my colleague Satvik will take you through and explain exactly how John can get value out of automation.
Thank you very much, Saheli. Now let's have a look at the plan of action that John has to follow now. So if we look at the typical resource mix of an IT help desk support center, we have the level 1 staff or the L1 support staff. Now level 1 support staff majorly work on the simplest of issues or service operations and service transition. Level 2 staff work on continual service improvement and assist in designing the service. And level 3 support staff or L3 staff focus on most complicated of issues like service strategy and service design. When automation is employed, we can see that the whole of level 1 staff and about 10% of level 2 staff can be completely replaced with virtual software engineers. Now, these virtual software engineers cost less than 50% of what a level 1 or a level 2 staff would cost. Moreover, if we take the case of human resources, to cover a 24-hour service cycle, we need 3 human resources to be employed in 8-hour shifts. Well, these 3 resources can now be replaced with 1 virtual software engineer who can work for you 24/7. Putting these together with the new resource mix, the cost of the service is expected to come down significantly as labor cost contributes to not less than 75% of the total cost of the service. So John must ideally go back to his IT service vendor and who has now automated his IT services and renegotiate the contract for IT help desk services based on the new resource mix. Now, this sounds good, but are there any companies which actually employ automation? John still needs to know if these benefits are really that high. So let's address John's concerns by looking at some real-life automation success stories to understand this more clearly. TNT Courier Services had password resetting service. Each time somebody needed to reset their password, they had to call the help center and it cost them £10 per password reset. The company knew that it had a lot of such requests, but exactly how many? There were an astounding 130,000 password reset requests each year, which cost TNT 1.3 million pounds, and that's quite a lot of money. The company then automated the system at cost of just 200,000 pounds per annum. This saved the company 1.1 million pounds every year. Now that's a significant saving, folks. In another case, a mobile service provider had a change management process for upgrading the software for handheld device subscribers and also issuing replacement SIMs for them. When the internal IT department was roped in, they quoted a total project cost of $800,000 and a project timeline of 12 months using human resources. However, they automated the process at a total project cost of just $80,000. That is a straight 90% saving in costs. And the virtual software engineers, the automated systems, they executed the change management process within just 6 months. That is half the time as it would have taken with human resources. So Terry, why don't you share some of your experiences with some live cases?
Thanks, Seth. Yes, let me give you a slightly different experience context. This is an example of automation in a global financial services organization, in this case a Fortune 100 retail bank, one of the largest retail banks in the world, who wished to address an efficiency challenge with their database support operation. So within their IT support function, they had a specialist team delivering support for databases, and they were a large implementation. They had over 10,000 database instances with over 220 FTE staff supporting those databases. That was a mixture of resources in offshore and onshore locations. They had people in Mexico, India, the Philippines, and then in the US and Europe at higher cost. Simply the size of that workforce meant that, as well as a higher cost of resource, and in this case over $12.5 million annually, there was quite a high level of rework and process inconsistency between different teams, or even between people different people in those teams. So following deployment of a robotic automation platform, in this case, which they deployed across level 1 and some level 2 database support tasks, similar to the diagram you showed us earlier, the bank was able to reduce their requirement for support resource by over 70 FTE. They completely removed the level 1 support layer, replaced with virtual engineers, with robots, and their net saving post the cost of implementation and acquiring the automation solution was $12 million over 3 years. And a significant byproduct was the vastly reduced error count through the robots replacing people. Just as an adjunct, subsequently they were able to scale up the same solution across their server environment, over 100,000 servers, and their level 1 teams are being migrated into the same environment to support over 100,000 servers in addition to the databases. So a very successful use case for robotic automation in this case.
Thank you very much, Terry. That was indeed a very interesting example. So John was now convinced of the cost-saving potential, but then he thought, like every technology, there would be challenges to this technology as well. Are there indeed challenges to automation? John was right. There are a few potential challenges to address. The first major challenge is the maturity of the business process, and this plays a key role in determining the degree of automation possible and the cost of automation. It is easy to program a simple and standardized process rather than a complicated and dynamic ad hoc process to a machine. The more mature the client's business process is, for example, if it's an optimized process, the easier it would be to automate that process. The second challenge is task priority. When a human being is attending to multiple issues, he can prioritize the more critical issues. However, the machine will be unable to prioritize issues. To help the machine prioritize, the machine should be pre-fed with the issue criticality order. Issue criticality order specifies the level of criticality based on the type of issue. Now, for example, system shutdown is higher criticality as compared to a password reset, which is in fact simple. But still, these controls can only overcome this challenge to a certain level because there is a high level of subjectivity attached when it comes to task prioritization. A third challenge in automation is unpredictability, wherein the automated system behaves in a completely unexpected manner and may result in unacceptable outcomes. This may happen mainly due to design issues and algorithmic conflicts arising due to machine learning, which updates these algorithms from time to time. To overcome this, automated processes should mirror the process of a human resource, including asking for approvals from higher authorities in case of carrying out exceptional or critical operations. The fourth and final challenge is vendor lock-in, which is actually a common challenge in business process outsourcing. Generally, automation contracts last for 2 to 4 years. The process know-how is completely disclosed to the IT service provider, and in this case also the automation vendor, and this would act as a barrier in switching from one vendor to another. This can however be overcome by designing contract with clauses of IP retention for the process know-how with the end user client. Now that we have addressed the challenges, let's have a look at the risks associated with this technology. The major risk is network intrusion, which is in fact a common risk. But in case of automation, the risk is directly and completely passed on to the client from the IT service provider. For example, in case of a BPO service provider who is automating an insurance claim process, if a hacker intrudes the automation system and instructs the system to process all claims as eligible for reimbursement, the insurance company would incur great loss. Proper security protocols decrease this threat, but do not eliminate it completely. Automation is definitely going to affect jobs, and this is seen to be another threat. This may not go well with a lot of people, including end-user companies and IT service providers as well. However, I'm very confident that in due time, competition will force the adoption of this disruptive technology. A classic example in this regard is that of Cognizant and Accenture, who followed in Infosys' footsteps in adopting automation platforms to automate their infrastructure services. Terry, can you add on some more potential challenges or say considerations which you can see for this technology?
Yes, thanks, Sathwik. A couple I would raise. The first one is that of dependence on technology. So clearly, once a process has been automated, the staff time will either be redirected or perhaps staff redeployed or removed from that process. The organisation becomes completely reliant on the technology to perform the bulk of those processes. I say the bulk because there will always be a small level of human resource to manage exceptions to process. But the bulk of the resources have been removed, therefore the client is completely dependent on the technology. It's vital, therefore, that the solution being delivered is enterprise class and is architected and delivered with a high degree of resilience and high availability to ensure that challenge or consideration is taken care of. The second that I would raise is the maintenance of the deployed solution. So while it may be easy to quantify initial capital costs of acquiring, deploying, configuring an automation solution and the cost of running that solution in life, it's important for procurement teams to consider the full life cycle costs of automation. Supported environments, as we know, don't remain static, and therefore a solution must be able to accommodate change without requiring a lot of extensive rework of those automated processes. Just as deploying new tools and systems in a people-based service would require those teams to be educated in new platforms, then so must the automation technology be taught, and that needs to be factored in. If the solution deployment's not well planned and executed, then that education process can be complex and costly. But of course, if it's done well, it can be much simpler and quicker than the human equivalent, because you're effectively just educating the software once rather than having to run an education program for teams of people. So an important consideration, but also a potential for benefit as well.
Thank you very much, Terry. Now, so after gathering all the information, what did John finally do? Our procurement manager, what did he finally do? So you want to know what the story, where the story goes? Saheli, why don't you take us through the rest of the story?
Sure, Sathwik. So finally, John went back to his IT service provider, ensured they employed automation technology, renegotiated his contract terms, and achieved his $1 million cost-saving target. But now John is waiting for automation to show its potential in other IT service categories as well. Can this happen? Let us take a shot at predicting the future of automation. Currently, only non-voice helpdesk process is automated. In the near future, possibly maybe within the next 1 or 2 years, we may see natural language processing capabilities completely changing the way human interacts with machine. Then I hope voice-based help desk support will also be automated. Some of the biggest IT service providers have tied up with automation vendors and are conducting workshops to train developers in ITSM automation platforms. These vendors look to automate most of their infrastructure services. It is also predicted that in about 6 to 8 years from now, we may see artificially intelligent entities playing with reusable modular source codes in various combinations, trying to design new software and also automatically testing the software. Infosys is one such company which is doing a lot of research on automating its software process completely. Hence, this is no longer a dream, I guess. This is just a distant reality. So Terry, what do you think? How will the IT automation market look like 5 years down the line?
Well, I think big is the quick answer to that question. But if we think about automation programs just now, then currently the primary focus for those programs and initiatives tend to be to improve internal efficiency within a given function or department. In the near future, there will be an increasing focus on extending that initiative beyond the department or a function or even a company boundary to begin to automate interactions with customers and suppliers and third parties, increasingly using automation to offer self-service execution of requests, changes, activities, and also to focus on complete prevention of activities through links into various monitoring and analysis systems. So examples would include self-adapting automation, which modifies itself as it experiences certain conditions or heuristics. Additionally, a future byproduct of automation, I think, will be the creation of new products and services as a direct result of having automated processes. If we replace human execution with software, then additional data is gathered about the processes that are followed, the success and failure rates of those processes, and the number of times a certain path is followed and a certain outcome is achieved. So gathering that data in a far more consistent way allows us subsequently to mine and analyze the data, which will in turn allow enhancements and innovations which would never have been possible with a manual process, which would rely on people recording their activity in a level of detail that just isn't realistic. So I think we'll start to see new products emerging as a result of people having automated their processes. I guess in summary, it's clear that not only is adoption of automation increasing across both service providers and end users, but the rate and scale of adoption is increasing. And you've already mentioned some organisations of considerable size that are embarking on initiatives. To support that, a recent survey we ran of outsourcing companies, of which 77% said that automation was a priority initiative for this year, for 2014. And 100% of them, all of them, said that it would be a priority initiative within the next 3 years. For end users, automation is an opportunity for optimization far greater than that offered by offshoring, as you've shown. For service providers, it has to be a priority, or they'll get left behind by the market as their competitors use automation to offer cheaper, better, more resilient services. For end users entering into outsource agreements, it's a vital consideration, the level of automation being deployed by the service provider, and should increasingly be a core component they consider in choosing a best-of-breed supplier.
Well, thank you, Terry. That was quite insightful and quite predictive about the future. So no matter whether our IT services are in-house or outsourced, we can leverage automation. We have also seen that automation has great potential in helpdesk services by saving up to 40% of the total labor cost. And in future, we expect automation to extend its impact to other IT service categories as well. So we can rather say that the ability of technology is far greater than the willingness or maturity of organizations to exploit it. So I would rather ask my participants, are you ready to exploit the technology? With that, I conclude this webinar. Thank you for your time and participation.
Thank you, Saheli and Satvik. That was quite interesting. And Terry, thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate the inputs that you provided for this webinar. I do have a couple of questions. I think I'll start off with the most frequently asked question. What are the initial infrastructure costs to implement automation technology?
To take this question forward, let's look at two ways that automation can be approached. So one way is using the ITSM automation toolkit, which is the IT service management automation toolkit. And there's another approach, which is the robotic process automation. So when we consider robotic process automation, it's actually implementation from the vendor side. So basically they target one specific process and they digitize that particular process and use robotic entities to replace human resources in that particular process. So it's not something like the ITSM toolkit, which is more like a developer's toolkit which can be used to automate a varied range of services rather than one specific service. It's more like a toolkit. So when we talk about ITSM toolkit, the implementation of an ITSM automation toolkit on premises would cost anywhere between say $3 million to around $10 million. And when we're talking about robotic process automation, it would cost from anywhere between $500,000 to $2 million. And these initial costs are actually spread over a time of 3 years. Now these initial costs would actually vary based on a lot of factors like the maturity of the business process which is being automated over here, and the scale of the operations which the particular client has. So Terry, would you like to add to this and say how the initial costs would vary?
Yes, of course. To take your two examples forward, with an ITSM platform, generally the cost is a factor of a couple of things. The scope of the platform being invested in, so how broad the platform functionality is, and in some cases it's possible to buy parts of the functionality and not all of it, so that will affect the price. But the key critical factor tends to be the scope of systems and devices and services being managed by the ITSM platform. So a solution for 50,000 servers is going to be significantly more expensive than one for 1,000 servers, for example. So those are the factors in consideration. And sometimes the number of users accessing and using the ITSM platform is also a factor. For robotic automation, it tends to focus, the commercials tend to focus much more on the number of robot resources being deployed in place of human resources. So the software is licensed based on either a number of processes that can be delivered by the automation, or more typically the number of robots that are used to replace human staff or to augment human staff, and therefore it's a relatively easy way to interpret a business case by comparing the cost of a robot with the cost of a human resource, as indeed you did earlier in the session.
Thank you very much, Terry.
Another question is, why is automation not applicable to finance and accounting outsourcing or human resources outsourcing? These categories are more mature than BPO, hence cost of automation should be pretty low. So that's one of the questions. I think it was slide number 5.
So when we talk about finance and accounting and human resource outsourcing processes, the finance and accounting outsourcing processes are actually pretty much mature because the financial transactions or the outsourcing processes, the financial transaction or commercial processes are pretty much well defined in terms of the steps that are followed in that particular process. But when we are actually talking about automation, task level automation or activity level automation is enough to automate a financial or an accounting process. There is actually no need for going for a robotic automation in this particular category. When it comes to human resource outsourcing, one of the common steps that we've seen, which is automated in HR outsourcing, is that of shortlisting of resumes, which most of the companies do. So for one particular job opening, if they receive say around 10,000 resumes, there is a software which is automated and that sees out and filters out the resumes. So basically, these are based on task and automation level task level automations, and not based on robotic automation. So that's the reason why we do not focus on those particular services, as it doesn't make sense to go for a automation which would cost higher as compared to task or automation activity level automations, which can be done through a simple software.
All right. Thank you very much. I think those were the questions that we had from the various participants. So again, I would like to thank Terry for your time today, and we really appreciate the inputs that you provided. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a good day.